Welcome to Health, Wellbeing and Lifestyle, where professionals in the field inform, educate and inspire the community to be healthier and have a balanced lifestyle. Our first guest today is Julie Makin, a psychotherapist specialising in hypnotherapy, and we will be exploring whether rejection is sabotaging your self-esteem. Welcome, Julie. It's so great to have you.
Lovely. Thanks very much for having me.
So what is rejection?
Okay, so rejection is a feeling that we get within our bodies. So when we feel it and when it comes up for us, it's kind of like an internal wound. And when it's touched, when something happens to us within our environment and that wound is touched, it really hurts. That can also trigger the brain's same process. So that might trigger that feeling in the body, that pain and hurt within the body. So it is actually felt as a physical pain.
And what is self-esteem and how is it impacted by rejection?
A lot of people actually seem to get confused between confidence and self-esteem. And confidence is confidence in abilities. So when you're a fantastic cook, you're great in the kitchen, but take you out of the kitchen and put you in, to be a car mechanic, and all of a sudden you're not so good. You're not going to have confidence there, but you have confidence in the kitchen. Self-esteem is about how you value and perceive yourself. It has to do with the stories that you tell yourself. I don't matter, and I'm not good enough. And when we're telling ourselves these stories, it actually affects how we feel about ourselves internally. And when we feel about ourselves that way internally, our body language changes, our energy changes, and it affects the way not only you perceive yourself, but how others treat and perceive you. The way that rejection affects low self-esteem. I'd like to tell you just a little bit of a story about myself. Look, I grew up in a household where my parents would be gold standard parents, all right? So what they taught me was, to be compliant. They taught me to do as I was told. They taught me that other people matter, to put others' needs ahead of my own, that not to talk over anybody else because that would be rude. But in actual fact, what they were teaching me was that I don't matter, to put everybody else ahead of me. And what I can tell you is that in order to be authentic, to feel good about yourself, you really need to be asking yourself, is this right for me? And checking back in with the body and how it feels. Find that reconnect with the body. I grew up with IBS. So I really started to notice it back in high school. I had this mass bad pain in my gut. It was seriously like a 9 out of 10. And I found myself going past the empty classrooms. It was recess, past the metalwork room, past the woodwork room, past the kids that were out there playing t-ball, and I didn't think I was going to make it to the reverse charge, phone, because I wanted to call my mum. Anyway, I got down there, was able to call my mum. My mum came and got me, and by the time I got home, the pain had subsided. I felt safe at home. So rejection not only has you feeling a pain and hurt about how you value and perceive yourself, but your body also responds to it. It helps you to escape. The IBS would actually help me escape the school ground. It helped to show me when I don't feel safe. And just to lead on from there, as an adult and understanding how rejection affects my body, and when somebody else is attacking you, your body shouts loudly when needed. And it's up to us to listen. So rejection, self-esteem, your body's letting you know. Now, because I was brought up in that family, I'm going out there into the world with that conditioning. And so I'm actually attracting people to me that are perhaps wanting to manipulate me. And They know it from your body language. They know it in how you speak about yourself, how you approach others. And you may find manipulative people that will take advantage of you. And I do feel that this is where domestic violence actually comes into play. To me, mental health and that feeling of safety is really number one priority for our community, for our society, for our government to start listening.
If someone's been rejected, how can they rebuild their self-esteem? Can you tell our audience how they can build their self-esteem, what they can do?
Of course. Okay, so when somebody's feeling hurt and pain, it's from a previous wound. So I invite them to start asking themselves, is this safe? Do I feel safe? First question. And the other question is this right for me? Yeah, it's really important. Once you start doing that, innate boundaries will start coming in as you start to heal yourself, and you'll find that things change. Yes, there might be pushback from others around you because, oh my God, all of a sudden you're, not being so subservient. You're starting to listen to what is right for you. And when you do that and you continue to do that, others around you will start to change how they approach you, how they respond to you. And another thing that I invite your audience to do is if they have any feeling like their emotions are feeling overwhelming, or perhaps there's a situation where their emotions are more than what the situation requires, I really invite your viewers to seek a professional therapist. Go to pages where people have association membership to ensure that you're seeking out the right professional assistance. And I invite viewers to also note that people who work with the body, I feel that that's where it's at. I feel that trauma, Bessel van der Kolk, he's massive in the US, big psychiatrist, and he notes that trauma cannot be healed from conscious mind therapy only. We need to start working with the body as well. So please seek professional therapy.
That's really helpful, Julie. Thank you so much. If you would like to know more about rejection and self-esteem, and Julie Makin, please visit her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And after the break, we'll be back with another interesting guest and another interesting topic.
Stay tuned. After the break, naturopath, respiratory specialist and published author Julia Rudakova will be talking about the mind-body connection and the language of the body. Welcome back. Our second guest is naturopath, respiratory specialist and published author Julia Rudakova, and she will be talking about the mind-body connection and the language of the body. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you so much for having me.
How does our body speak to us?
That's a very good question, and it's one of my favorite topics. From the Chinese traditional medicine, we know that every organ in the body is connected through meridians. Meridians, they're energy channels to different tissues. For example, if there is a meridian going through a shoulder, so that's your gallbladder, there is liver there, and we know that the organ will have an affinity to certain emotions. For example, again, going back to the liver, it's anger and frustration. It's a topic that requires a few examples. And a person may be frustrated at work. There is a situation that hasn't had any resolution so far. Maybe the person needs to speak up. Maybe the person needs to get the team together, and there is a little bit of hesitance because there is a fear of public speaking, and that situation compounds and the person feels frustrated, maybe a little bit angry with themselves, and then develops this constant pain in the neck, in the shoulders, and that's your liver meridian. So if it doesn't go away after a massage, after a relaxation exercise, if it keeps coming back, then it is time to listen. It is time to listen to your body and act on that. And another example of the mind-body connection is as simple as a sore throat, for example. So a person experiencing sore throats on a regular basis, definitely outside of the flu season, signifies to us that the unconscious mind, so talking about mind, we have conscious mind and an unconscious mind, it presents that problem to the person in the physical form, because there is no other way that your unconscious mind can communicate to you other than through the body's experience, and the best way we respond is to pains and aches. We're not going to respond to something pleasant, we're going to enjoy it. So the pains and aches is the language of the body that listens to the unconscious mind. So the solution could be as simple as having that difficult conversation with a colleague, with a family member that you have been putting off, or you were afraid of their reaction maybe. And that's normal, right? But the solution is acting upon that, identifying why could that be? When was the first incident of that sore throat, right? Outside of the flu season, when was it? And when did it repeat again and again and again? What happened in your life? Who were you talking to? Who were you communicating with? Another example is a sore tummy. So this area, the abdominal area, is all to do with digestive process. And when we can't literally digest something, information in life, that just goes against our beliefs, against our comprehension, then we will start experiencing those digestive symptoms on a regular basis.
How do you address your symptoms?
Firstly, to be in the body, to start listening, not to dismiss those aches and pains if they come with regularity. If it's a pattern, then we need to be able to drop into the body and start listening and moving that emotion. Just as I mentioned, that rock that you throw into the water and the ripples, we need to be able to move those ripples up out into the edge of the pond so that they are neutralized and the body is not affected.
What are your tips for understanding the language of the body?
So now, to understand the language of the body, we need to be able to experience the body fully. We need to be in the body. And you will say, well, how is it you're not in the body? We're all in the body. Oftentimes, when we're immersed into problems, problem solving, we literally get outside. We dismiss the body's symptoms. We dismiss what we're feeling. And I know it's funny, but the most common thing is that we don't stop and have a toilet break when we're submerged into some problem solving, and we don't have a snack when we need to. We don't have a glass of water when the body asks for it because we stop listening and we think that we can do it later. And the same with emotions. Putting it on the back burner is never going to work because we will forget, and then the compounding effect of that is greater aches and pains. So to be present in your body, the easiest way to do this is to be able to control your breathing. So the breathing is your bridge, is the bridge between the mental and the physical, between the emotional and the physical, and even the spiritual and the physical, because in the word respiration, you know, we have the root is spirit, inspiration, respiration, all that linked to the spirit. And when we do the slow breathing and bring ourselves into that parasympathetic nervous system response, which is rest and digest, everything slows down. We can start listening to how we breathe, to our breathing rate. We can connect to our breathing muscles, to the diaphragm, and drop the shoulders down and feel the body. And normally in that time, in that moment, nothing else exists. And if we manage to take that break, even once or twice a day, to connect to ourselves, and to start listening to our body, your health will benefit greatly. And as always, please seek advice from a health professional and get your individualized health plan.
Thank you so much, Julia. If you'd like to learn more about the mind-body connection and Julia, you can visit her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. Stick around because after the break, we'll be back with another guest and another interesting topic.
Stay tuned. After the break, trauma therapist and author Melissa Hiemann will be talking about how trauma shows up in our parenting. Welcome back. Our last guest, Melissa Hiemann, is a trauma therapist and author, and the topic we'll be discussing today is how trauma affects our parenting. Welcome, Melissa.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming. So, Melissa, how does trauma affect our parenting?
Yes, so firstly, I'll explain what trauma is. So trauma, and in relation to parenting, is usually ages 0 to 7, where we have a very strong emotional response where we feel very scared or very stressed out, but we don't have someone safe there with us to help us process that, or we feel like we're trapped and that energy can't move through our body and it gets stuck in our body, and it can cause behaviors, negative thoughts, and flashbacks later in life. It can definitely affect our relationship in regards to that we have with our kids, our relationship with parenting, our relationship with another parent, if we have a partner, because we're taught certain ways of how to be nurturing. We're taught certain ways of how to discipline a child, and we've received it in certain ways. And so that can impact what we do with our children, right? So for example, with me, my mum was left at a boarding school when she was 4 years old. And so she didn't have a lot of nurturing there. And so when she came to having me, it was really about, in that generation, the food is on the table, roof over your head, and there wasn't much emotional support, and she would never sit down and play with me. And so for me personally, as a parent, I forgive her, and I understand that that's just the way that she was brought up. But then when it came to actually playing with my child, I actually found it very difficult, and that nurturing and playful side didn't come out naturally, and I had to really work on that. Another example is, say someone is very strict as a parent and they believe that hitting or that kind of discipline is good, even though they might be alcoholics because they have anxiety all the time and they're always worried about getting in trouble. Even as an adult, they're just like, well, that's the way I was parented. This is how I'm going to parent my kids. And that strictness, the child and the parent lose their bond and their connection and trust. And the kid just learns that I only get attention maybe when I'm doing something naughty. And that can really perpetuate the behavior, and that could be generational. Then when that child becomes a parent, they could believe that the discipline in that way is the right thing to do. And then you can go on the other spectrum where a parent is just very carefree. The child is free range and let to do whatever they want to do. There's no structure, there's no guidance. As a parent should be a guide and a safe connection for that child. And then they might feel like a little bit lost, and they don't fit in anywhere, and they're not connecting with anyone. So there's like a real spectrum there of how trauma can affect us, and how the way we were parented can affect how we parent our children.
That makes a lot of sense. How do we be aware of our own personal trauma when we're parenting?
So if you're a parent, you might know how triggering parenting can be. So for example, if your child is having a tantrum, right, and maybe growing up you weren't allowed to cry, you were told to shut up if you cried. So when that trauma is trapped in your body, you couldn't process those emotions, and those stress hormones are trapped in your body. Now, when your child is having a tantrum and screaming, it's triggering that part of you that wasn't allowed to express itself, and you want to quickly shut down that child because it's so uncomfortable in your body because that trauma is being triggered by your child. So instead of telling the child to shut up and stop crying, we can become a bit more self-aware and think, this is feeling very uncomfortable for me, and just getting curious about that and being there for your child and being really present rather than being really stuck in how you're feeling and perpetuating that generational trauma that could happen if generation after generation they were told, like, shut up, don't cry. So parenting really starts before we become a parent. I know that it starts way back to the partner that you choose, you know, and the partner that you choose is going to have such a significant impact on your nervous system, on your stress levels, on how peaceful you feel, and how conducive that is to having a really nurturing and safe space to bring a child into. So it really starts with, am I attracting the right partner or going for the right partners that are conducive to having a really trauma-aware, conscious parenting environment, a peaceful environment to bring a child into. And then as when you become pregnant, and then at about 3 or 4 months old in the womb, the nervous system of the baby and the child is already scanning the mother's nervous system and the environment to see what they're going to come out into. And trauma can already start there. So even for myself, when I was in the womb, I would have been scanning and seeing, what is my father like? What is the household like? What am I coming into? Oh, my mum feels very alone and unsupported. And I could take that trauma on while I'm growing in her belly. So that's when it can start. And then ages 0 to 7, a child's body, even if they don't consciously remember, remembers every single thing. So when you let your baby cry it out, when you hit a toddler, when these things happen, when a child is watching domestic violence or watching fighting, they're literally absorbing every single thing that is going on and what happens to them or what doesn't happen to them when they're not protected and abuse happens. And that's their blueprint for how they are going to be as an adult. And most of our personality is created ages 0 to 7. So the more traumas that there are, and there's a study called the ACE study where if there's violence in the house, alcoholism, abuse, neglect, the more likely someone is to have obesity issues or health issues, addictions, and issues in their own relationship.
What advice would you have for parents out there to repair their own relationships with their children?
Yeah, so when we explain all of this information, they become aware it can bring up a lot of guilt and shame of perhaps how we've caused our children trauma. But the great news is there's neuroplasticity, which means that we can heal our relationship with our children. You know, we can say sorry to our children, even if we thought we were doing the best that we could, which we definitely were. And we can start to repair that bond that we have by creating positive events, creating positive memories, holding space for our children's emotions, holding space for our own emotions firstly, so we can hold space for others. So we can start to break the generational cycles and the perpetuating traumas that are getting passed down in our DNA, in our environment, in our families. It's never too late. And the first step is, you know, working with someone yourself and releasing that guilt, that shame, and healing your traumas, and you will naturally evolve and be able to heal that relationship with your child.
Thanks, Melissa. That's such valuable information. If you'd like to know more about Melissa Hiemann and how trauma shows up in our parenting, go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And that's all for us for today. We'll say bye-bye until next time. If you'd like to know more about our show, please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.